Hi guys, my name is Sheikh Faizan Ahmed from CCD and I'm here to discuss about JDBC drivers and types of JDBC drivers. Let's get into it. Before we go to what are JDBC drivers, let's discuss what are drivers. Drivers, a program that controls a device. Every device, whether it be printer, disk drive, keyboard, must have a driver program. So, as you can see below, according to the diagram, first program. After the operating system gives the order to print or just do some task, the device driver commands the device to perform the task. What is a JDBC driver? A JDBC driver is a software component enabling a Java application to interact with the database server. For example, using JDBC driver enables you to open database connections and to interact with it by sending SQL commands or database commands, then receiving results with Java. So, let's discuss about types of drivers of JDBC. JDBC driver implementations vary because of the wide variety of operating systems and hardware platforms in which Java operates. So, JDBC drivers are divided into four categories: Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, Type 4. Type 1 is JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Type 2 is native API driver. Type 3 is network protocol driver, also called middleware driver. Type 4 is database protocol driver, also called pure Java driver, or also called thin driver. So let's discuss about type 1 driver, which is JDBC, ODBC JDBC driver. Type 1 driver provides mapping between JDBC and Access API of a database. The Access API calls the native API of the database to establish communication. A common type 1 driver defines a JDBC to ODBC driver bridge. ODBC is the database connectivity for databases. JDBC driver translates JDBC calls to corresponding ODBC calls. Thus, if ODBC driver exists for a database, this bridge can be used to communicate with the database from a Java application. Insufficient and narrow solution. Insufficient because it goes through multiple layers. Narrow, since functionality of JDBC code limited to whatever ODBC supports. As you can see from the diagram below, type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC API, then ODBC API in turns communicates with the native API, then native API communicates with the database, then the connection is done. It goes through ODBC native API to reach database, so it is a bit more complex. Type 1 advantages and disadvantages of type 1 JDBC ODBC driver. Advantages are easy to use, can be easily connected to any database. Disadvantages are performance degraded because JDBC method call is converted into ODBC function calls. The ODBC driver needs to be installed on the client machine. We'll discuss about type 2 drivers. Type 2 driver communicates directly with the native API. Type 2 makes call directly to the native API more efficient since there is one less layer to contend with, that is no ODBC. It is independent on the existence of a native API or a database. Here, type 2 driver communicates with the native API. So in turn, native API communicates with the database. So without ODBC, here it is one layer less, and it is not so more complex than the type 1 driver. Let's discuss about advantages and disadvantages of the type 2 driver. Advantages: performance upgraded than JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Disadvantages: the native driver needs to be installed on each client machine. The vendor client library needs to be installed on client machine. Let's discuss about JDBC Type 3 drivers. Type 3 drivers make call to the middleware component running on another server. This communication uses a database-independent net protocol. Middleware server then makes calls to the database using database-specific protocol. The program sends JDBC call through JDBC server to the middle tier. Middle tier may use type 1 or type 2 driver to communicate with the database. As you can see from the diagram below, here type 3 driver communicates with the middleware server, and then in turn middleware server communicates with the database with type 1 or type 2 driver. Here there is no native API or UDBC. It is more simpler as it is only as it has only a server in the middle of it. Let's discuss about type 3 advantages and disadvantages of it. Advantages: no client-side library is required because of application server that can perform many tasks like auditing, load balancing, logging, etc. Disadvantages: network support is required on client machine, requires database specific coding to be done in the middle tier. Maintenance of network protocol driver becomes costly because it requires database specific coding to be done in the middle tier. We'll discuss about type 4 JDBC drivers. Type 4 driver is an all Java driver that is also called a thin driver. As we have heard it before, all Java driver or full Java driver. It is called because in the present time we are all using this type 4 driver. It issues requests directly to the database using its native protocol. It can be used directly on platform with JVM, most efficient since requests only go through one layer. Simplest to deploy, no additional libraries or middleware. As you can see from the diagram below, type 4 driver directly communicates with the API database with specific database protocol, and that's it. It is more simpler, it is more faster than other types of drivers. We'll discuss about type 4 database protocol and its advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are better performance than all over other drivers. As I said before, it has better performance than all the other drivers, like type 1, type 2, type 3. Type 1 has to go through two layers to communicate with the database. Type 1 has to go through ODBC API, and then ODBC communicates with the native API, and then native API communicates with the database. In type 2, ODBC is not present there, so type 2 driver communicates with the API, native API, and then native API communicates with the database. But in type 3, the database directly communicates with the middleware server, and then middleware server communicates with the database with type 2 or type 3 databases. So yeah, let's continue. Advantages are better performance than all other drivers, no software required at the client side or server side. Disadvantages are driver depends on the database. So this concludes my presentation about the JDBC drivers and types of JDBC drivers. Thank you.